Hello and welcome to another podcast. Today we're fortunate to be joined by Richard Egan from Cushman. Hello, Richard.
Hey, Stephen. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to see you. Richard, I'm intrigued, to say the least, about your solution. Richard, you're positioning yourself as a trust layer in healthcare. It's both technical and philosophically quite interesting. What inspired you to start the company, and what gap did you see in the current healthcare data landscape?
Yeah, thanks. You're right. It's a really interesting area. I spent 17 years in banking, and as fascinating as that was, one of the things we were doing was bringing together uh, financial information so that the corporate treasurer in large multinationals had the visibility of all of their information to make decisions. So I left there and I joined a health insurance company. And at the same time, I joined the Royal College of Surgeons in the Faculty of Sport and Exercise Medicine. So I went from dealing with banking information to dealing with health information. And I couldn't get over why a major insurer didn't know the health status of the members in order to proactively support any concerns or any ongoing conditions. And when I started looking at that more, part of it was driven the criteria for health insurance meant you couldn't ask somebody about their conditions that hadn't materialised. You could only process claims and so on, and then a little bit of pre-existing conditions. Um, but when I looked at the underlying information, and a bit of a data geek as well, right? So the messaging around an admission to a hospital or a discharge or a diagnostic report moves almost identically to the same way that a financial transaction set of information will pass. And I looked at that and I was like, this has got to be something that we could progress. So I started looking into it there, and really, I was sitting in that Faculty of Sport and Exercise Medicine. I was running the Rugby League Island set up there as well. So we were over at a World Cup in Australia. And these guys, these working class guys from the north of England, were talking with their doctors, and the doctors were absolutely 100% clear. Our job is to get this player on the field. There was no ambiguity around what the health situation was. They had a job to do. The medical team, physios, dietitians, whatever, they had a job to get that person healthy. And then I looked at my own situation. My dad was unwell ever since I was 5, and he just passed through, went to a visit, would come home, went to a consultation, would come home, see a GP, go to physio, whatever. And there was never this view of getting him back to health. It was just a transaction, go in, see, move on. So I had these kind of 3 different things. I had the banking experience, I had the College of Surgeons experience, I had the health insurance, and then with the Rugby League. And I just felt that if a lot of the solutions that I saw in health were very much data plays. They were, this is a database with your data, and it's up to you to put it in, and it's up to you to interpret it. And I just thought
Okay, so
they were rubbish. So that's where I decided, let's build something better.
Okay, perfect. So in your view, why has consent management in healthcare been treated as a compliance checkbox rather than an infrastructure enabler?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the relationship in health, it generally is quite paternalistic. So you're as an individual, I'm very nervous around clinicians, even though I'm in this space, because I just treat them as being so much more intellectually superior than me in the field. And I feel inferior. I don't feel I can engage because I don't have the language for it. I don't have the understanding. I don't have the 10 years of training. So even though I sit in this area and have done now for almost 10 years, you still feel that I'm the layperson and they're the expert. And then if you play that to people who don't sit in this field, you can imagine that's much higher. So consent generally is between clinicians to share information. It tends not to be me as the person, not a patient most of the time, thankfully, but me as the person, the individual. I want to share my information with the person I'm talking to. I want to feel like I have a voice, a decision. And I always look back. I played rugby. I'm relatively slightly built, but in my head, I was the same as my brother, who was a prop forward in rugby league. I broke my shoulder 3 times because I just was tackling badly. And I remember one time I went, and the consultant said to me, he goes, "Look, I'm fed up with seeing you. You're always coming in with the same thing." He goes, "You broke it again, but the way it's fixed this time is at a point sticking forward." He goes, "If you were a cyclist or a jockey, I would pin it straight because that's what the protocol tells us to do. We'd re-break it, we'd pin it, and it'd be straight. He goes, but you're taking front-on contact. So if we leave it as it is, it's probably stronger. And touch wood, it hasn't gone again since then, now retired and all. But that decision making and that suits me. That's the right course of action for me, rather than that's the right course of action per the protocol. That's another significant factor in trying to come up with something that is an engagement tool for patients as opposed to just a data repository.
Sure. So how does Kushla differ from existing EHR consent modules or national data opt-in systems like the NHS model?
Yeah, and predominantly, if you look at how we've patented the solution, if you go into the standard hospital, the hospital entity is at the top of the tree. If you think of this as data flowing, so the NHS trust goes into the NHS hospital, it goes into the the ward or the clinic or the remote unit, and the bottom of the tree for data is the patient. And we've kind of flipped that and said, well, the patient should be the top of the tree, and we should be getting data in from wherever that comes from. And there's medical data buried in hospital systems, buried in GP systems, physio systems. But for me, health isn't just medical records; it's healthcare data. So you've got physio information, you've got optician information, you've got your activity, you've got where you live, how you live, your lifestyle, all that kind of stuff. And that's what paints the picture. And we use this image all the time. You might see it on the site where it's a pixelated view, and the more the pixels appear, the clearer the vision of the faces. And for us, that's the key thing. I remember one of the guys I met early on was very much in the social determinants of health and social prescribing. And their view was, somewhere in the region of about 75, 80% of conditions are driven by how you live and your lifestyle, not necessarily your genetics or your DNA.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell me something about how Kushla works?
Yeah, I mean, we've essentially three models. If I try and keep it as simple as possible, the base layer is just an aggregation product. So we bring data together. And what we do there is we suck in information. So if there's a health information exchange, like the NHS API or the US systems, the QHINs, we bring the data in using the kind of technology I mentioned before. We then connect into wearable devices, and we have patient recorded measures as well. So the surveys essentially that are carried out. So that brings data together. We then have a module in that where you can essentially record your consultation with a clinician, and it summarizes it. And you can either do it purely as text, just verbatim what's said, or you can get the summarization. So that base level gives you all of the data that's available to you at that moment in time. And depending where you live in the US and the UK, that's much more advanced. In Ireland and other jurisdictions, it's not as easy to get. But essentially, that's the base level. We have an AI layer that sits above that allows you then to interrogate your record. When was my last vaccination? Whatever. So that's the base level, and that's kind of the hygiene factor. Then above that, what we're doing is preventative care. So we've taken the guidelines for, I'm 49, family history is cardiac, whatever. So there are 15 things in the guidelines that I'm supposed to get done every year. And we've taken those and just applied this to try and encourage me to take part in my preventative health. So it's recommendations, what you're supposed to do, and then based on the readings and the measurements, what activity do I need to address? So that's the second layer. And the third layer then is, if you've got a particular condition, how can we support you managing that? And it could be a chronic condition like rheumatoid arthritis, or it could be an episodic thing like a hernia repair or something.
Okay. Have you seen demand from pharma or clinical research organizations or even digital therapeutic platforms who need to establish audit-ready, transparent data consent records for DCTs or multi-country trials?
Yeah, there's a good bit of interest in the clinical trial space, and I think we met with some guys that kind of act as an intermediary between the trial or the pharma company and essentially who does the trials. What they were seeing was that the onboarding process is quite expensive. It takes a long time. You have to bring in an awful lot more people because the fall off rate and so on. So by having that person's whole of life information, one, you're more likely to get people to sign up to take part in a trial if they've already an awareness of a condition or a risk factor for that. And then you can remove an awful lot of the difficulty from the trial by having that person's history as well. So you can see the difference between why a product might be working with one cohort of people, but not another. So yeah, definitely interest in that space. I think that will evolve over time significantly in this whole space as well as for us.
Okay, could you tell me a little bit about how Kushler might help reduce friction in evidence collection across various stakeholders, from hospital sites, say, to a tech platform, an insurer, a regulator? How would that work?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, it sounds very, very clinical and very trial based there. But I think if you take that back to the individual, like if I go into a consultation, any consultation, if I have a concern at that point as an individual, like something doesn't feel right. Uh, if the information that I have over my last year or 2 years is available, it informs the clinician to be able to look at the trend and go, right, we can see based on what you've got there, this is how your blood pressure is going, this is how your diet is going, this is how your weight is going. And I think I always compare it back to try and bring it back into the human level. I bring my car for a service or a annual test. I don't bring my car every month to check the tire pressure because I have a light that pops on and tells me. So if you'd look at that as the human, if the more information that's passively collected about me through the likes of Apple Health Kit and Google Health and so on, the better the trend information. And then if I'm actively engaging in capturing records because I have an interest in it, then that further augments that set of information as well. And then, so we look at kind of different personas, with the person who just doesn't want to know anything, but it's great to have that data captured. With the people, probably myself, who just has an interest in it, would
Yeah,
like to use some of the kit and like some
yeah,
of the
indeed.
technology. And then you've got the ultra elite people who measure everything from diet to sleep to water to everything, and they've just got a much, much richer data set. So I think if you take it away from the clinical trial kind of angle and just put it into the human, which of those personas are you? Do you want to not know? Do you want to know a bit, or do you want to know everything? And then you're just building up a much richer picture for when you do actually need to get some feedback.
That's quite an interesting analogy with the car. I like that.
Yeah.
Have you considered licensing or embedding the Kushler engine into other platforms, white labeling it as a service as part of a go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen is that people who use a product in a particular setting, like a hospital, they don't want to move. That, it's taken them so long to get expert in that particular electronic health record platform, whatever. They don't want to move around. And what we're seeing now is some of the leading electronic health record platforms are allowing you to embed your product in there. So if I take Cerner, for example, the Oracle
Yeah.
platform, you can actually drop a link to the Kushler patient summary into the patient file within Cerner. So the clinicians hate having to go through, the worst thing in the world is I go into hospital and say, all my data is in these 12 apps. Yeah, I don't have time, give me a summary. So if we can do what we're doing, which is give you access to that record within your existing electronic health record system, it should, in theory, improve. And that was essentially goes back to that banking world. If we can give you a visual presentation, you can make a decision quicker.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So often we speak of health technology assessment agencies who express doubt about real-world validity in patient-reported outcomes or wearables. Could your consent tool help validate patient data provenance and preserve traceability?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. The lens by which you look at there varies depending on how you as an individual perceive your data.
Yeah.
So we know people lie. Absolutely. And we asked the question, and we put in lifestyle information, said, how much do you drink on average every month or every week? Sorry. People, oh yeah, 10 units. Absolute rubbish. So we changed the question and said, how much did you drink last week? Like
Yes.
on Monday, yeah, I had a beer after work. Tuesday, we had a bottle of wine. All of a sudden, you're 31 units. You're like, oh, I won't tell that. So sometimes the lie is intentional because you're trying to hide the
Absolutely.
behavior. Sometimes it's an accidental lie. You just believe that you are healthier than you are. And so part of the capturing of information being passive is good because it gets true data. Part of it is triggering somebody to engage. So we like a lot of the new technologies that are coming in where you can do a lot of readings. So yeah, they might not be FDA approved or CE marked just yet. But if you go to a clinician once every year for your blood testing to be done properly and get your bloods done and so on, but then for the rest of the year, once a month, you take your blood pressure using one of the
Yeah.
EPPG machines, for example, it's a trend. The clinician can see the difference on our system. This is what was taken using clinician input, and these are the ones that are captured by the individual using a point of care product, but they're useful. And yeah, you'll trust it, to a lesser degree. But if it's 90% accurate, it's worth taking. So I do think that ongoing capturing the devices are going to get more and more accurate, but they do complement and support decision making, but they don't replace the individual's need to actually apply some kind of clinical expertise.
Okay, that's actually a very good articulation of return on investment. So let's talk about return on investment to hospital chief information officers or procurement leads. Is it a risk reduction patient trust, or is it an enabling new revenue from data collaborations? What is the return on investment on Kushla?
I always try and flip that question back and go, well, what drives the decision making in the hospital? Are you a revenue generating entity, which obviously the US model is probably more akin to that, or are you more of a social organization like the European model? Uh, if the return on the investment is cash to the bottom line, or is it health to the individual? So you look at it and go, right, by having the information, should the clinician be able to make a decision more accurately and come to a conclusion quicker? In which case, instead of, if you break the traditional consultation, subjective objective assessment plan, and say, right, if currently over half of that is collecting information and half of it is on the care plan, could that be more time spent on assessment and plan? If you do that, then that's a better outcome. Both the clinician is doing something that they actually got into medicine generally to do, which is to get people better.
Yes.
And you're spending a percentage of time focused on getting them healthy, which in theory should reduce the number of readmissions. So you go back to my dad's situation, don't keep getting passed around to just check the same stuff. Actually go, right, can we get this person back to recovery? So the return on investment is that person healthier faster? And then at the clinician level, am I still, are you spending the same amount of time with a consultation, or are you doing it a little bit quicker? So there's operational efficiency to get through more work and possibly reduce your queues. But I don't think the health system will ever stop spending as much money. And I think there's this big, oh, we have to reduce costs. Well, I don't think you do. I think if healthier people put money back in, and we did a piece of work there through Arthritis Ireland. So we're starting to pilot a health journey for rheumatoid arthritis. They had an independent review done through the RCSI on the cost of having rheumatoid arthritis on the individual. And in really simple terms, €3,500 on extra spend that you have to do because you might have to get taxes, or you might have different costs for you as an individual. But €3,500 lost to the exchequer because people weren't working as long. So you might reduce your. So it's a bit of a balloon squeeze, really. Do you want to take money out of the claims process, the reimbursement, or do you want to get people back to work who then pay more tax?
Absolutely.
So I think healthier people is the societal need, not necessarily a reduction in a budget.
Okay. So we've talked about that. You mentioned the US a couple of times, and in the US, initiatives like the TEFCA and the 21st Century Cure Act are reshaping data sharing over there. Are there opportunities for Kushla to offer cross-Atlantic data governance bridges?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the US model, they've kind of had a few stabs at trying to get that right, and 21st Century Cures Act now is really heading in the right direction. The TEFCA from an exchange framework and common agreement really working well. The layer above that now that's sitting in the qualified health information networks to make sure sharing is done right is another massive step in the right direction. I think the most significant piece, both in the US and elsewhere, is individual access. So at the moment in the US, if you are a clinician and you request records from the health network, you'll get about 90% of a response rate from the participants. If I request my information, then it's 10%, but that 10% has increased from zero a couple of years ago. So there's a genuine reason for nervousness, which is the hospital says if I give Stephen Haken's information to Stephen Hawking, then
Yes, absolutely.
the hospital is at fault. So we as a digital technology platform have to provide evidence that we've used an approved identity solution, and we've verified your photo ID, your liveness, and so on. So that should reduce the risk of wrong information being collected.
Absolutely.
But then
Okay.
you're
So
getting it.
that brings up the question of where is Kushla hosted, and how do you ensure sovereignty and localization of data while still supporting multi-jurisdictional consent?
Yeah, and we're built within the Microsoft Azure platform, so we use
Yeah.
their multi-region tenancy situation. So when you log in, we ask you where you are resident. Might not be where you are. You might be on holiday in Ireland and have an accident, but you are resident in Louisiana. So your data remains resident in the Microsoft instance that we have. So we have the database structure in the US for our US clients, and we have it in the EU for our EU clients and UK for UK clients. So the data remains resident where it is, but you may bring in records. So if you had an accident in one country, you can bring that record back with you to your to where you're resident.
Are there emerging consent standards? I'm aware of Kantara and the consent receipt my data, all the HL7 consent resources. Are consent standards changing?
Well, they're improving because they're instead of it being so broad. So you got Kantara is obviously leading the way there at the moment. So previously it will be up to me to say I share my diagnostic information, I share it, so blood tests or whatever. It's now coming down to the individual level and say, right, yeah, I'm happy for you to see my last 3 blood tests, but I don't want you to see the ones from 2 years ago. And I think that's the big thing. There's this big, it goes back to if you walk into a pub today, everyone goes, oh, the most sensitive information is my health information. You walk into any pub, people are telling their friends about what they've just had done in the hospital.
Absolutely.
They won't absolutely not tell you what's in their bank account.
No.
So,
no, they won't.
So there are certain bits of information that you think are relevant and you're willing to share, and there are other bits of information that they're just too sensitive, or you'd be embarrassed if that information got out. And I think it's that ability to share. So we have a little tick box. Which of these records do you want on your patient summary? And you have the right to withhold that. And that's no different. If you went into a doctor's appointment and they asked you for your medical history, you will shield the bits that you don't think are relevant.
So that becomes a minimum viable trust framework, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it, yeah.
Okay, no problem.
But it puts it in your control as well. So if you say, I am sharing this information with Dr. Jones for the period of a week, and then removing that when I'm not seeing him anymore, you're in control of it. That's the key driver really for us.
It's the patient side of data altruism, really, isn't it? And so, is there something you're passionate about and you want to talk about?
I think the move from care being delivered in a I am unwell situation to preventative care, that's really what we're really focusing on. At the moment, there's a significant move, and a lot of it is driven by the technology that's available, but there's a significant move that supports individuals being in charge and participatory in their health and lifestyle. So some of that, so if you take a traditional interaction years ago, you would go in when you weren't feeling well and you go see your doctor and they'd refer you on to someone, or they'd medicate you, or they'd tell you there's nothing wrong. You kind of had those 3 routes and out you went. And then you won't see the doctor again until the next time that you had a concern. People are getting a little bit wiser and going, right, well, I know that in my family there is a history of X, and that manifests itself down the road. So can I look out for the symptoms of that happening earlier? And the earlier they're detected, the more chance you have of having some kind of intervention that changes that. And I think it go back to something we were chatting about earlier, that kind of NCT approach.
Yeah.
The technologies are coming in. There's brilliant devices. There's things that are checking voice to see is there any early indications of neurological conditions. Are you slowing down your speech? There are walking speed assessment tools that can check if you've got an increased risk of a trip or a fall. There are devices that you're wearing on your ring or on your wrist or whatever that are continually checking ECG type measurements and continually checking. So devices that are consumer focused, allow you to do ongoing monitoring. But then you've also got the need where a screening activity can actually be much better at the point that that screening is delivered. So we're working with an entity, a charity in Ireland called Construction Workers Health Trust. They provide health screening for construction workers within the building site. So they go on, they'll do the testing, and they'll get some results. The level of quality around the testing is, because it's done point of care, it's all done in the in the environment of the site, but the individual is getting the results straight away within the Cushla platform. They can then use that if they get referred to say, well, we think you need to go and see your GP in the next 3 to 4 weeks. They have the results with them. They're digital. They can be shared online. So I think that move from I only go to the doctor when I'm not well to I would like to keep monitoring myself and I know what are my risk factors. And then that is also evolving into based on the advances in the ability to do either DNA testing, epigenetic testing, and so on, you can find out where you've got a higher risk factor as well. And you can understand, well, what's personalized to me. So if I have a deficiency in, one particular area, I can get advice and take action against that as well. So I think that whole move from being responsive to I'm not feeling well to tracking what's actually changing in the physiology, I think that's fascinating. I think that, again, there's more cost up front because you're continually monitoring. We're back to that return on investment point. But you're remaining healthier for longer, you're contributing to your own life first and foremost.
Yes.
What's the best return on investment? Being healthy.
Yes.
To then the economic piece of fewer people being out of work.
And finally, Richard, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I just want to ask, if Kushler achieves everything that you hope, what does the world look like for you in 2030?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for me, can we support people to be partnership in or being in partnership with their health? And that's it really. I want to be the person that makes a decision about what's right for me. So I gave that shoulder example earlier on. I can make the decision about what way to be treated if I feel like I understand it. And I think today individuals are nervous about the language.
Yes.
Medications look like Wi-Fi codes, terminologies, they're just complicated. And
Yes.
if we can change, if Kushler can be a part that changes the ability for people to interact with healthcare, understand what it means, just understand the terms, understand the phraseology, make
Yes.
that simple, and then be able to choose, well, what level of engagement do I want? And then what level of engagement am I going to take in decisions? It's still the clinician relationship. It's still that personal touch between a healthcare provider and me. But I feel like I'm party to that decision making rather than reactive to being told.
I'm very pleased about Kushler's position right now. I think you're actually trying to remove paternalism, which I think has been a problem for years in many healthcare systems. I really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to taking up this conversation again in 6 to 8 months when things have expanded for you yet again. And I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thanks, Emily, for having us on. Really appreciate it.